Thanks, Dimitri. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Brian Colbert of the hamlet of San Anselmo. Welcome to the Hub Transportation Virtual Workshop number 1. At a high level, the Hub is the nexus between Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, Red Hill Avenue, and Center Boulevard. It connects West Marin with San Rafael and the Ross Valley. This is the first of 2 community workshops that will be held over the next 5 months. This evening's workshop will focus on understanding what is of greater importance and what is of lesser importance to the community as we begin exploring the overarching goal of potential solutions to redesigning the Hub. Next slide, please. As you can imagine, given the importance of the Hub, it touches upon many stakeholders in our community. This slide shows the towns, cities, transit organizations, nonprofits, and other civic organizations that are key stakeholders in this process. And this is just a short list. There are many, many more. I'm excited for this evening, and we have a team of professionals here to explain what we know so far and here to get your input, which is so important to all of us. This evening, I'm joined by staff from San Anselmo's Public Work Department, including Sean Condry, our Director of Public Works and City Engineer, Scott Schneider, our Assistant Public Works Director and Manager of this project. Dmitry Laptev will be handling the logistics of the Zoom this evening. I'm also pleased to announce we'll be joined by staff from Parisi Transportation Consulting, including David Parisi and Jennifer Schreiber. I'm now going to turn this over to David to discuss the purpose of the study, what we know, and to begin soliciting your input. Over to you, David.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mayor. My name is David Parisi. I'm with Parisi Transportation Consulting, and we've been hired along with a team of 6 other consultants to conduct this study on behalf of the town. As the mayor mentioned, this is a very, very important study. It's funded through a grant that was awarded by the Transportation Authority of Marin with a match from the town of San Anselmo to look at a whole bunch of different ideas to relieve congestion, but also to look at other multimodal solutions for cyclists, pedestrians, and public transit as well. At the end of the day, the intent is to develop a roadmap or a blueprint of short, medium, and long-term solutions for all these different modes that can be implemented over time. Here's a map of the study area and the area we're considering the Hub. The Hub, of course, is the multi-legged intersection of Sir Francis Drake Center and Red Hill and Greenfield Avenue. But we're going to study much more than just that multi-leg complicated intersection. We're going to look beyond it because we want to understand the effects and opportunities at other streets as well. The purpose tonight, again, is to get your input, but also present what we've seen so far in the data we've collected. Here's a quick timeline on the schedule. Tonight, of course, is the first community workshop. Before tonight, we've spent several months collecting data, mapping out the study area, assessing traffic, bicycle, pedestrian, transit conditions, safety effects, and actually doing a lot of surveys on measurements and whatnot. Again, tonight's the first workshop. After tonight, and we definitely want to hear a lot of your feedback, we're going to start developing conceptual alternatives, again, short, medium, and long-term concepts for the multi-modes. We'll be evaluating those as well using performance metrics. And then in the fall, we don't have a date yet, but we'll let you know, we're going to conduct another workshop to report back on our findings. And then finally preparing and presenting a final report for the San Anselmo Town Council. We have 5 points to our agenda. First off, we're going to talk about some of the history of the Hub. How do we get to where we are now? And the Hub is incredibly fascinating. Also, what's going on now? Or in the last couple of years, pre-pandemic, were some of the conditions that we were seeing for the different transportation modes and land uses near the Hub. What are some of the ideas that we're thinking about? And we would definitely want to hear from you on what some of the issues are and other ideas as well. And that's what point 4 is all about. We want to get to that point of the presentation as soon as possible so that we can hear from the community. And finally, we'll wrap up with what our next steps are. We're going to stop here, though, make this a little bit more fun and try to get some input from you right away by conducting a poll. And I'd love it if Jen can pop up that poll. What we're going to ask you to do is to, we'll spend a minute here answering 2 questions. Jen, how would you like folks to do this? Answer the first question and then the second one, or do they do it at the same time? They just kind of scroll right down.
Yeah, how about everyone just answers both at the same time?
All right, excellent. So you get to use 2. There's the first question is, what are the main purposes that you travel through the hub for? You can pick up to 2 of the multiple questions there. And the second question is, how do you normally travel through the hub? And we realize you probably use multiple modes, but just choose the most popular 2 ways that you actually get through the hub. So we'll spend a little bit of time here. We can actually see how many people have voted so far, 64%. Keep up the good work, folks. And then we'll report back to what we're seeing. We'll give you 15 more seconds. There are 23 people that have voted so far. If we have another poll later in the presentation, if more folks join in, we'll have a higher response rate at that point in time too. Well, why don't we stop right there and see what we've got. Excellent. So as I mentioned, I think we had maybe 25 people respond to this poll so far, so it's not statistically significant, but it's interesting. And what we're seeing is that the main purposes this group, the folks that are on this call, use to travel through the hub. Number 1, traveling to and from other destinations. And secondly, shopping and dining. Interestingly enough, the other responses, working, recreation, and commuting to and from work, are not that highly represented by the folks that are on this call tonight. The second question was, how do you usually travel through the hub? Well, there you go. By far and large, it's driving. We had a huge response rate there. Walking and biking came in far second and third for the responders for tonight's poll. And just 1 person in the group responded that they use public transit. Well, thanks. That's interesting to us. We're going to continue on in the presentation, and we got another question later. Next part of the presentation is, how do we get here? This is really interesting. We've done some research on the hub. Maybe some of you know a little bit about the history. I'm actually going to turn to my narrative here to talk a little bit about what we've learned in our research of the hub. And this is important because it's actually shaped the configuration of the intersection in the nearby area. Prior to the 1800s, artifacts found near the hub suggest that the area was used as a crossroads by the Coast Miwok, who fished in the San Anselmo Creek. Later, land grants brought Mexican and European settlers to the area. The North Pacific Coast Railroad completed the Sausalito-San Rafael section of its line in July of 1874. The hub became a railroad junction. At that point, it was actually called the Junction for trains traveling between Sausalito, San Rafael, and on to Sonoma County. More people began to permanently move to the area following the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and fire. In the early 1900s, the hub area saw growth following the incorporation of the town of San Anselmo. And the hub has seen more activity as a result of this growth and more people passing through the area. Car travel began to dominate, particularly following the construction of the Golden Gate Bridge in the 1930s. Railroad service through the hub ended in 1941 as a result of this mode shift, and vehicle traffic became more pronounced. In 1946, the 7 a 7-corner intersection was completed in the hub. This is the forerunner of today's intersection. Traffic continued to grow in the 1940s and 1950s with complaints about the confusing intersection layout and congestion. From 1961 to 1970, construction was underway to transform the hub into its current intersection layout. Congestion continued to increase. A study that we found from 1968 noted that approximately 33,000 cars were passing through the intersection a day. While subsequent studies in 2004 and 2017 have noted an increase to approximately 65,000 cars today. So it's peaked in the last 15 plus years at about 65,000 cars a day. And we do know that past studies have focused mostly on cars without an eye towards other modes of transportation. There's some really interesting photos in this slide. On the bottom left, you can see there's no signal there. It's actually a patrolman that is controlling traffic through the intersection in the 1960s. And on the top left, there's an article, and I'll quote, it was one of the most complicated bottlenecks in California highway system, completely baffling traffic cops. The poor motorists wave and grimace their way as best they can. And a very small caption in the photo says, traffic was light at the time this picture was taken. So the issues that we see today in the hub have been around for a long time. So where are we now? And this is obviously you're here tonight for a reason, so we'll talk about that. As I mentioned, lots and lots of cars pass through the hub on a daily basis, about 65,000 vehicles, making it one of the most, if not most, congested intersections in the County of Marin. Here's some photos of traffic congestion. The top left is traffic approaching from Sir Francis Drake. Top right on Sir Francis Drake coming from Fairfax. We know that eastbound traffic can be queued up and people can wait through many, many traffic cycles in over 20 minutes at a time. Public transit. The hub is served by bus lines from Golden Gate Transit and Marin Transit. As a matter of fact, both transit agencies recently moved a couple bus stops on to Drake near Bank Street to avoid having to go through the hub twice, which amounted to almost 8 minutes of bus delay. But nonetheless, we still have a lot of ridership at the various bus stops. There's a very popular bus stop on Center that carries over 175 passengers per day. But the buses do have a dance through this intersection, and have to go through it a couple times just to navigate on certain routes. Of course, the pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, it has many gaps in it. The dark gray lines, if you can see those are the sidewalks, which exist on some streets, but not all of the streets. There's not many, except as shown in purple, completed bikeways, designated bikeways, but instead bicyclists are required to share the roads as shown in the yellow lines. And of course, here's some conditions that many of you probably experienced. If you are a pedestrian or a bicyclist trying to cross the intersection, the crosswalks are long. You wait through a long traffic signal cycle before the light turns green and you can cross, and you're also competing with turning traffic. And here's some of the conditions that we see the bicyclists use. Some bicyclists choose to use sidewalks or take alternative routes or share the road with traffic, or are very brave as they are going through the intersection, navigating with turning traffic. And safety is a concern. We've been looking at the collision history, which just tells us how many collisions and types of collisions that have been reported. And we know that about a quarter of all the collisions that have been reported have involved a pedestrian or a cyclist, in other words, a vulnerable user. And we're very concerned about that. Primary collision factors overall, the majority of it has to do with unsafe speed, traveling through the intersection. We imagine a lot of that's because folks have just don't really want to put up with the delays and are pushing it through the end of cycles. Improper turning movements, in other words, not yielding or going on a red when folks are not supposed to or allowed to, and unsafe lane changes is at 7%. The crash locations for vulnerable users are primarily at the hub intersection itself, at Center at Drake. We also see some crash locations just a little bit away from the intersection as users are trying to find different routes, Sir Francis Drake and Bank, for instance. We're always concerned and have to take land use and zoning into account. This is a map that shows the zoning through the town in San Anselmo and in the study area. And you can see the different colors are showing the different zoning. At the same time, there's a lot of pavement near the intersection for the travel lanes and parking as well. Actually, at this point, I'm going to turn it back to the mayor, who's going to chat about some of the work that's been going on at Creek Park and adjacent land use.
Thank you for that presentation, and thanks. So Reimagine Creek Park is connected to flooding. As most of you know, downtown San Anselmo suffers from floods, most recently in 1982 and 2005. And those flood affects lives and homes, and they negatively impact our economic vitality. So the county has been leading a multi-jurisdictional effort to reduce flooding throughout the Ross Valley. And part of that effort was to remove a building in downtown San Anselmo. So the community in downtown San Anselmo, led by the Reimagine Creek Park Committee, a group of really engaged community volunteers, partnered with the county to create a community commons, a gathering place that would reflect the values of San Anselmo. Now, the work's been delayed slightly due to first COVID and some problems up the state. But right now, if you go down in San Anselmo, and you can see in the lower picture, the vision is we currently have a temporary gathering space. And the truth is, if there was ever a silver lining during COVID, we've seen a proof of concept. It has become, in the words of a local restaurateur, the dining room of San Anselmo. We see people of all ages, all types. It's a real, truly equity play. And I believe it's increasing and encouraging sustainability, because so we see so many people walking. And it's just a real opportunity for people to gather safely, socially, and by drawing people to come downtown, it's a real boost to economic vitality. So right now, we're continuing on with the project. We're about to begin public outreach and find out how people are enjoying the space as we continue to design it into the future. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is just a conceptual idea. I think there's going to be several that get conceived over the next year or two. But we're going to be looking at adjacent land uses, including the Creek Park, as well as places like Adrenaco's and others where we got to consider loading and access. So all the land uses near and close and adjacent to the hub will be under consideration as part of this study. All right, we're ready for another poll. And Jen, I'm going to ask you to put this one up. And this is just a one question poll. We currently have 37 participants at the meeting. And the question here is, what are your main priorities for the hub? And you can choose here, you can choose two here as well. So reduce congestion, improve the quality and access to bus stops, make it easier to walk around or through the hub, or make it easier to bike around and through the hub, improve environmental sustainability and resiliency, and finally, improve the hub's landscaping and physical appearance. So we'll wait a moment here and see what folks' responses are. Almost 2/3 of the folks have voted so far. About 3/4 of the folks have responded. Let's close this in about 15 seconds, Jen. Again, don't worry, this is just a quick sample. We're not going to do much with this other than it's very of interest to us at this point in time. Excellent. Okay, thank you for your responses. And not surprisingly, the majority of folks primary goal or priority is to reduce traffic congestion through the hub. And as we know, we have 65,000 vehicles going through the hub and major delays. So that is not surprising to us, but far and away the #1 priority of the folks in this workshop tonight. But tied for second, very close, was biking and environmental sustainability, and just right behind those, walking and improving the hub's landscape and physical appearance. Way behind, according to the people in this meeting tonight, was to improve the quality and access to bus stops near the hub. Thank you for your responses, and we find that incredibly interesting, and we're not surprised because the studies and newspaper articles for the last 50 years have pretty much been about reducing traffic congestion. So where do you go from here? We are going to be looking at many different ideas for fixing and changing the hub over time. Again, short, medium, and long-term concepts for multiple modes, including traffic, pedestrians, bicycles, transit, and so on. And this is just a slide you've seen before, just to reemphasize those goals. From a traffic standpoint, these are just some ideas. There's many more, but these start from possibly low cost to higher cost and longer term concepts. They could include things such as redoing some striping and signing, right sizing the vehicle lanes. In other words, doing some modifications, trying to squeeze some more vehicle lanes if possible. Looking at the traffic signals, the signals at the hub are very old and obsolete. There's 4 approaches to the hub. Each approach gets its own traffic signal phase, which is very inefficient, but that's how it has to work based on how the lane arrangements are currently. So we're going to look at different ways to arrange the lanes and make the traffic signals work. Rearranging the intersection could mean removing some of the pork chop islands. Those are the islands where there's free right turns that go around. Possibly prohibiting certain movements during certain times or during certain signal phases to actually improve capacity. Maybe even rerouting traffic along different roadways. It's been thought about before, maybe grade separating some types of movements. And there's been an interest in possibly adding a roundabout to the intersection. So these are just some ideas. We want to hear from you about additional ones as well. From a public transit standpoint, we will be looking at potential bus stops or route changes, maybe providing some bypass lanes or what are called queue jumper lanes at key intersections, and maybe traffic signal prioritization where buses get the first green, and other amenities. There's lots of things besides these 4 bullets that are on the table. And again, we would love to hear ideas from you. From a bicyclist standpoint, we know that there's only very short lanes going to and through in the eastbound direction from center onto Miracle Mile, or actually onto the frontage road. So we're going to be looking at other ways to do some pavement striping and signing, possibly do some bike only traffic signal phasing, look at maybe even different routes. Maybe it doesn't make sense to go through the hub. So we'll be considering that as well. Class 1, which is those Class 1 facility or shared use pathways. Class 4 are bikeways that are protected, such as shown in the top right photo. Maybe even doing grade separation for a bike facility, meaning above or below the hub. And finally, we'll also be looking at many different ways to accommodate pedestrians more safely. As I mentioned, and as you know, there's super long crosswalks, and you're always looking at the right turning traffic or left turning traffic in front of you. So we'll be looking at ways to possibly reduce the length of crosswalks. Again, what can we do with the signal if the signal's to remain? Refuge islands, safe places to cross the street and pause while you do so. Possibly adding crossing locations, not maybe at the hub, but either east, west, north, or south of the hub with special signals and other things. So again, we want to hear from you tonight about what works and what doesn't work, and some ideas for pedestrian considerations. And actually, without further ado, we want to turn this over to you. And at this point, we are going to ask for your input. And really what we want to know tonight, because we're not going to solve things tonight, but what we're here want to do is hear from you. What are your experiences traveling to, through, around the hub? What works? Are there things that actually work that you'd like to see expanded? And of course, what doesn't work? Are there things we missed in our presentation? What more do we need to know about before we start exploring different ideas? So again, what we really want to do is hear from you, because we need this feedback so that we can continue on with our next step. And with that, I'm going to turn it to Dimitri, who is handling the logistics tonight, to talk about how we can get your input and some of the ways to provide that over the Zoom meeting. Dimitri.
Thank you, David. To share your feedback, you can either raise your hand if you're on your computer or smartphone. There's a raise your hand icon. Please, if you want to speak, raise your hand and keep it raised so just we know how many people want to speak. If you're calling in, you can *6 to unmute yourself and then *9 to raise your hand. We're going to try to keep it to 3 minutes per person. We'll see how many people want to speak up. I might have to be more stringent if there's a lot of people, but just, I'll shoot for about 3 minutes. And then if for some reason you don't want to speak, but still want to provide some kind of feedback or ask questions, there's a Q&A section enabled. I'll read those questions or comments out loud at the end of the presentation, or after everyone who wants to speak says something, and then I'll read those out loud as well. And with that, let's go to the first hand, and it looks like it's Councilmember Ford. Ford, you can now unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Dave, for the presentation. I was heartened to see that on our instant poll, the majority wanted a better flow through the hub. And Dave, you'll recall, I'm not sure how long ago it was that you and I and Debbie Stutzman were on a conference call maybe 6 to 8 years ago with a guy who was kind of the pro from Dover in the roundabout department from Boulder, who said that in his view, just very sort of anecdotal looking from a sky view down at the hub, that there is sufficient room for an effective roundabout to be, or traffic circle to be constructed there. I found that encouraging and exciting then, recall it now, and I'm happy to see a traffic circle is among the options that we're considering. That's one point. And then another point is, although it would probably be exorbitantly expensive and would preclude us from being able to do it, there's a place, and I might have the report done by the bicycle folks, not the general bicycle one in Marin, but it was a lobbying group that lobbed TAM a lot. And I can't remember the name right offhand, but they went to, I forget, it was like Denmark or someplace like that. And there was a lifted up part of the traffic circle that was bicycle and pedestrian specific, that segregated, as you had noted in your presentation, the cars from the bikes. So that probably would be too much for us to do. If we were to do a traffic circle at the hub, obviously it would be a monstrous pain in the hindquarters for a lot of people, and there'd be lots of aggravation. But in the final analysis, I think the overarching popular objective of better flow through the hub would be achieved. So thanks for the opportunity to comment. I'm done.
Thank you, Ford. Let's see, anyone else wants to go? Please raise your hand. I'm seeing, here we go. Pascal, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, I have. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, hi, everybody. Thank you for doing this. I think it's really great. I have to say I'm intrigued by a turning circle But whenever I go through one, I always cringe because I just wonder if Americans are really kind of know how to do that. You'd have a lot of people going different places, and I guess I worry about actually sound quality, people honking their horns at everybody coming around the circle. So, but I like the idea. I just would be concerned about people's ability to adapt to it. And then my second, really just a kind of a comment is, I mean, I know we want to try to do all these things with this mode here. I mean, this hub in terms of the intermodal aspects of it. One thing though that I think the recent lesson with the Richmond Bridge and the dedication of the bike lane, and I totally support bikes and making bikes easier to use. I really do. But I think that was really driven by an agenda of a smaller group of people. And I think if you really look at climate change, I would be careful about how much space you take away from vehicle traffic in order to address a real or perceived need for lots of bicycle space. That's my one comment about, don't downsize the vehicle capacity in order to respond to a bicycle demand that may or may not be there. So anyway, that's it. Appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you very much. All right, let's see. Next person, Mark Bell. You should be able to unmute yourself, Mark.
No, you go speak. Hi, it's actually Ling-Xian Bell. I'm Mark's wife, and we live in Fairfax. And I grew up in France, and when they first started having roundabouts, they've been amazing. They're all over the place, everywhere, and they really work, and they're really not that hard to use. And they make so much sense. If you miss your turn, then you can just go around and then you get it the next time. And it's really not very hard. So I was really pleased to see that it was one of the possibilities, because I've always thought that at the hub that would make things so much nicer. It's a lot more flowy and pretty. You can have something really nice in the middle of it. It really does work. I think it was whoever thought of that at first and started doing it was really a genius of of traffic and of flow. It's really great. So I think that's all I had to say. I'm really so much in favor of a roundabout or traffic circle, however you want to call it. There's a really nice one in Berkeley at the bottom of Marin, and it really works. It really works. All right, thanks so much.
Okay, I may speak, so I might raise my hand again at some other point.
Okay.
But you can move on.
All right, let's see. Who else do we have next? We have Quentin. You should be able to unmute yourself, Quentin.
Hi there. Well, it sounds like you might have multiple French people coming in today to chime in on the roundabout. So the same thing, I grew up in France, roundabout works. I've always wondered why in that space there wasn't a roundabout. I'll point out, I'm a biker, a pedestrian, and a driver. And I think at the end of the day, if we can put a roundabout, we're going to solve the car problems. Bike will be able to negotiate around cars without a problem. So, just chiming in, same thing as the previous person. I do think roundabout would solve a lot of problems. People would not have to try to time their crossing by knowing the lights and being able to negotiate the different lanes depending on when and what time they get to the intersection. They would just be able to take the roundabout and get out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's see who's next. We have Alan Spencer. You can now unmute yourself, Alan.
Yeah, hi. So I'm actually also originally from Europe. I'm from England, which is a nation that has loads and loads of roundabouts. Roundabouts are a part of the culture in England. I am rather skeptical about how much they fit into the culture in the United States. I live near Memorial Park, where some roundabouts were put in recently on San Francisco Boulevard, sorry. And in my experience, people really don't understand how they work. I mean, I think they've actually introduced an element of danger. They replaced four-way stops, which I think were actually more effective. Everybody understood the four-way stops. But the roundabouts, I don't know. The other point about the French roundabout system is, from my experience, I lived in France many years ago, and the arrangement there is that you have priority if you're coming onto the roundabout rather than when you're already in the roundabout, which is a very different system. And from my experience, it doesn't actually work as well in France, where you have that priority to the right and people come on and kind of clog the roundabout. In England, the system is that if you wait to get on the roundabout, but once you have a free space to come on, then you're on the roundabout, then you have priority over everybody else. And finally, I'd like to say that if I were riding a bike around a roundabout with other traffic in a intersection that's as congested as the hub, I would feel very vulnerable there. So that's what I have to say about roundabouts. I'm rather skeptical about their application in the United States because people just don't really understand them as well as I think they need to make that work.
Is that it?
That's it. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
All right, let's see. Ann Pulitzer, you can now unmute yourself, Ann.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. I really appreciate you guys looking into the traffic congestion at the hub. Are there other studies on roundabouts that have been built in California that handle the same amount of traffic flow and with the same sort of like timing and conditions that we could look at as a comparison, see how they have worked and not worked? It's such a busy intersection, and Sir Francis Drake it's not a highway, but it is a massive thoroughfare that I'd like to see comps with something else that was put in recently and see if that improves the situation or what. So is there anything out there that we can look at? It's my question.
Thank you. And then we'll have our panelists answer some of the questions after everyone has spoken. Thank you.
And I also want to say that I do agree with Alan regarding the roundabouts on San Francisco Boulevard. They have introduced an element of danger, primarily to pedestrians, which wouldn't really apply at the hub that much, but they haven't really been, as far as I'm concerned, an adequate solution. So I was just concerned how one would work at the hub with the massive amount of traffic that's coming and going on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Laura, you can now unmute yourself, Laura.
Yes, thank you very much for holding this forum. And I think it's just very interesting to see all of the ideas and the data that we're using. And I guess I put it in the chat, but I think that we need to approach this a little bit more as a regional hub rather than just San Anselmo, because if we have 65,000 cars going through here a day, I think that's like 8 times what the population is of San Anselmo, or so. I don't know the population exactly, but it's just a larger issue than our own community. And so I'd like to see, I just can't imagine how a roundabout would work there, but I'm thinking about different levels of, I don't know what you call it, some raised levels, not only for bicycles, but maybe for cars in certain directions or something. But I think we just need to take maybe a bigger, broaden our perspective here a little bit, because living here and going through the hub doesn't really fit my view of the town. It's just, we happen to have something that's more regional in nature that I think we need to deal with in that way.
Thank you, Laura. All right, let's see. Do we have anyone else? All right, Mark Bell, you can now unmute yourself.
Hi, so my wife pointed out that she doesn't think that in France, if you're entering, that you have a roundabout, that you have the priority. It's more like the English system, except they don't drive around the opposite direction. And then the other thing about having a roundabout, I mean, maybe somebody knows more about this than me, seems to me that you have more automobiles moving. And so actually you'd have a lot less pollution being created in that space and all these cars idling. And the other thing that happens with the timing that exists now is a lot of times people have no idea, for example, how long the light at Center and Drake will be if you're going eastbound. And so a lot of people cut up to Bridge Street and then to get onto Drake that way to go through the intersection because usually that lane has a lot longer. So, I mean, that may be a step that you can do in the interim that obviously wouldn't be particularly high tech, would be to, you know, adjust the timing on what's going on there. I grew up, there was a giant traffic circle, and they even incorporated, I think they even had traffic lights at the ends of them. But there used to be traffic circles on the East Coast several decades ago, and they got rid of them. I can agree with the people though on San Francisco Boulevard saying that they caused more of a problem because it's a small street, and I don't really think that roundabouts are called for. I know in Berkeley they have a lot of them, and it's quite difficult sometimes. You're not quite sure what you're supposed to do if you're not used to it. So I think the hub itself would be a good place for one. I can agree that San Francisco Boulevard is not. That's all I have to say. Oh yeah, and we're in Fairfax, so at least somebody outside of San Anselmo is chiming in.
Thank you, Mark. All right, next I have P. Sumoy. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Pascal, and I also lived in France for a number of years. I used to ride my bike through numerous traffic circles, and I've lived to tell. But I want to point out something that Laura mentioned earlier, and that is that this is more of a regional issue. The poll numbers, although it's a small number of poll respondents, indicate that they are going through the hub to someplace else, and which leads to the regional issue. And, you know, I don't know how anyone would, where exactly going, if they're just going to another town, if they're going out to the national seashore, et cetera. But that would also lead me to think that it would be important to include the transit agencies. I worked for the transit agency for a number of years, and I know that now it is very poorly structured and very fragmented, which is a shame. I used to commute by that, and I had an elderly mother that for a while only rode the bus, and the transfers were very difficult, mostly because of the timing between transfers and also locations. And now I see that in San Anselmo, it's very fractured, it's all over the place, and you have a really nice bus stop right there that worked very well for a number of years. And I realized that it does take time for the bus to circle, but I would definitely encourage involvement of both transit agencies and bus riders. The buses now have bicycle racks, so that adds another mode possibility. You know, it would be short-sighted to leave out transit, even though very few people responded to that on the poll. But I did notice that everything else that responded, especially sustainability and reduction of congestion, can all be addressed through pedestrians, biking, transit, something that isn't necessarily a private car. And so, yeah, it definitely is a more global approach, but I'll be really curious to see how you address all that. But I think it's very timely to do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's see. Jay Sever, you should now be able to unmute yourself, Jay.
It's Jean Severinghouse, and I grew up partly in Denmark, and two things. One is the roundabouts that had a very high volume of traffic also had traffic signals. So I don't know about 65,000 cars, but it seems like maybe it would have to have a traffic signal as well. everybody figured out how to drive the roundabouts. My folks did in short order, having moved there on sabbatical. And they're very good, but I think with this much traffic, I'm wondering if you probably know, but does this have to have a traffic signal as well as a roundabout? And the other thing is with it looks like it has to be at least a 2-lane roundabout, and that's I would not be safe as a bicycle rider on a 2-lane roundabout. So my need, I drive, I take the bus, I walk, I bike, and everything there works for me except biking. I can't go west from Greenfield Avenue to Fairfax. There's really nothing marked. There's nothing safe. The Bank Street crossing doesn't feel safe, and Center Street really doesn't feel safe. So if you could address the going from San Rafael through the hub area to Fairfax, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so folks, I'm not seeing any more hands raised. If you still wanted to share some feedback, please raise your hands now. And I got a hand. Kara, you should be able to unmute yourself, Kara.
Hi, it's Alex and Kara Schumacher. We just wanted to also say that we think a roundabout studying a roundabout makes sense there. I agree with those folks who have said that people can learn how to manage a roundabout. You know, again, I think San Francisco Boulevard is not an ideal example of that, since those are kind of mini roundabouts. But I think roundabouts are more and more common throughout the United States. So I don't think it's as much a cultural issue as it maybe was in the past. If they're well designed, I think they can help. I am concerned about all of the, you know, how you would manage all of the feeder streets around there, because obviously we want to be able to provide access from like Bank Street to downtown San Anselmo, and obviously, you know, kind of introducing cross streets really near a roundabout creates a lot of can create a lot of confusion, and kind of I think it also contributes to the overall traffic problem because you've got stoplights so close to the hub itself. But we just wanted to voice our opinion that we think a roundabout study would be great.
Thank you very much. All right, and I have Tom Peacock. You should now be able to unmute yourself, Tom.
Thank you.
We can hear you.
Good. I'm glad you can hear me. I do live on San Francisco Boulevard, or near it, a block away. And there is a learning curve to going around traffic circles, irrespective of the size. But some 30 years ago, I drove in England without ever having seen a traffic circle. I had no problem whatever. And in fact, it allowed me a space to make an error. I could go around again if I missed my turn. So in general, I think traffic circles are a good choice. But more important than that is the fact that we're facing global warming, and the start and stop of vehicles, even though they may ultimately be mostly electric, is a contributor to the atmospheric pollution. And I wonder if there's ever been a study of the condition of the air above the hub. It might be impressive in the regard of health. Secondly, when you build something, the traffic will come. And it might be noted that from Fairfax to San Rafael, the main route goes through the hub and on to Fairfax. And yet for years, even though this was advocated by the Bike and Pedestrian Committee probably a decade ago, not much has happened in that regard. There's some impressive Charles placed on Greenfield, but that's about all. And we really haven't tried to help bicycle and alternative modes of transportation. And it seems to me the future, we're going to have alternative modes of transportation, more of them. Not only cars, but smaller vehicles. Powered bicycles are a big thing now in the county and could become more important. And we should accommodate alternatives simply in the view that these help improve the quality of our air. And I guess that's all, but I might comment, someone else made this point, but probably a major traffic circle to hub will impact up and downstream roads and traffic. And that should be considered if the traffic circle choices have been considered. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. And next we have Rich. You should now be able to unmute yourself, Rich.
Yes, I'm all in favor of roundabouts, and I've been to Europe and other countries and driven through them. My one comment would be, I also walk through the hub when I do my walks for health all through the area. And I'm concerned that with roundabouts, given the volume of traffic that goes through there at 65,000 vehicles a day, that will become very problematic for someone who wants to walk down Greenfield Avenue or out through Center and things like that. So I think as you look at this, you need to be aware that there are some of us who walk, and we want to be safe as we go through that intersection.
Thank you, Rich.
That's all I have.
Thank you. All right, folks, if anyone else wants to say anything, please raise your hands. Otherwise, I'm seeing none. If I don't see any more hands, I'm going to start reading from the Q&A. Going once. All right. So for Q&A, we don't have that many comments, so I'm just going to read them all out loud for the record. But I think some of them were made as a comment to the speaker that was speaking at the time. So panelists, take notes on the relevant ones, or you can see them too. All right, so from the beginning, here we go. How many residents are on this webinar? Right now, we have 29 attendees. I think at peak, it was about 35. And then she's saying working and commuting to and from combined for over 50%. That was about the poll. A roundabout would be wonderful. I just want to bike west from Greenfield through San Anselmo to Fairfax on a safe for all ages and abilities bicycle riders bikeway that is well signed. Feels bad and unsafe on Center and at Banks both, with no route marked to go west. A real barrier. Thanks. Austin, Texas has some elevated bike and pedestrian paths. Does Caltrans have any data about how the traffic circles at the I-80/southbound Highway 89 interchange in Truckee work? 65,000 cars per day exceeds the population of San Anselmo by what, 8 times or so, way bigger than our own town. The first trip to Marin involved driving through the hub from LA to West Marin in 1989. This is a major regional transportation hub. We need a larger vision. Of all the ideas, I was happy to see the separation ideas, but not only for bicycles, but possibly cars. How do pedestrians navigate a roundabout? That is only in Paris. In France, you have to yield to cars already in the roundabout. Excellent point by Anne. Do we have some similar roundabouts in our state that we can study? Just a comment, sustainability is our highest priority for this redesign. Streamlining the traffic in the intersection will reduce emissions from idling traffic, and that will be essential to meeting sustainability goals. Thanks for holding this meeting. This was from Kathleen Gundry and William Malley, Santa Barbara. Is roundabout for 65,000 cars per day realistic? Do we have numbers on how many pedestrians a day? How can we reduce idling at the hub? Can we tell the motorists that the light is around 4 minutes long? Can we make sure that the lights work during a power shut off? And I believe that's all the comments I saw. Yep, that's right. I'm not seeing any hands. So I'm gonna say that now is the time for our panelists.
Okay, I'll start out. These are great observations and questions. We don't have the answers to all of them yet, and that's why we're doing the study. And we certainly don't want to get ahead of ourselves. There was a lot of questions about roundabouts, and for sure, roundabout at the hub would look and function much differently than the mini traffic circles along San Francisco Boulevard. So I just want to assure folks about that. But we will be looking at a universe of options. Again, short-term things as well, because a roundabout or a grade separated intersection would take years and millions of dollars. That's not available yet to implement. So we need to look at smaller things to get to a longer term solution. So we will certainly, on the longer term solution, be looking at things such as separating vehicles with grade separations. That's been sketched out before, and we'll take a look at that as well. And regarding a roundabout, roundabouts have come a long way from the ones you see on the East Coast. And it's more and more in the US, we're seeing more of these modern roundabouts, which look much different than many people have driven through. They have splitter islands and safe refuge areas for pedestrians. They can have bicycle facilities as well. Certainly in regards to a modern roundabout, we're going to want to test and see if one would fit within the town's right-of-way, how many lanes it may need to be. Would it need to have more than one lane, maybe multiple lanes, two lanes going around it, possibly some bypass lanes? And how would bicycles and pedestrians be accommodated? We will, I think we're also going to need to consider other routes, potentially for bicyclists and pedestrians, as well as the hub through nearby intersections. So that's on our work plan as well. Somebody asked about comparables for roundabouts. We'll definitely do that. We'll see, what would fit here, and could it, how well would it work to relieve congestion? And are there any similar cases currently under construction or recently constructed in California or on the West Coast? Let's see. We certainly realize this is a regional issue. We've had a lot of people at this presentation tonight that are not from the town, that are commuters coming from Fairfax, going to San Rafael or 101, or even headed down Sir Francis Drake through Kent Field. So we know this is a regional hub, and it has been for years. So we definitely heard from the very first polling question about the need to accommodate vehicular traffic through the area. I think for the most part, I've addressed many of the, if not most of the questions, but I just want to emphasize that we're starting with a blank slate. So we'll be looking at short-term things that possibly could be affordable in the next few years, some easy remedies that may not solve everything, but will get us a little bit closer. But the intent is to provide a blueprint for the future, so the town and other funding agencies such as the Transportation Authority Marin can try to find the money to implement a multimodal solution for the hub. Scott, Mayor, Councilmember Feynman, I don't know if there's anything you would like to add to my comments.
Yes, I would like to respond to the question about the signal during a power outage.
Yeah.
So the hub has a battery backup system that when the power does go out, the batteries will work for several hours. And then during that time, if it's a prolonged outage like a PSPS that we had the last year, we have a generator in the hub shack, so we can go out and start the generator and keep those lights working, because we have a lot of other signals in town that now have battery backups, but after the batteries wear out for a multi-day outage, they go dark, and we just can't have the hub go dark. Otherwise it would be backed up, all the way to Arizona. So yeah, we are very concerned about keeping the hub working at all times. And so that's a very high priority for us, and it will work during a power outage.
David, this is Mayor Bryan. Could I just offer a few closing comments?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, well, look, I just want to thank all the members of the public that have that came and shared their opinions and their thoughts. And for those people that were concerned that we're not viewing this regional, one of the things I think staff did was they put together that opening list of stakeholders, And it was a short list, even though it had, I think, approximately 15 stakeholders. I know that staff is committed to extensive outreach. And so I really want to thank you, David, and everyone else for that level of community engagement. We've been talking about the hub for a very long time in many ways. And the first step in some ways is always the hardest. And we have to be prepared to hear everything. And I think tonight's process typifies that commitment to community engagement. Thanks again.
And I have one last hand raised here from Council Member Ford. I'll allow him to talk right now. Ford.
Thank you. And that's Council Member Green. Ford is my first name. So I just want to point out that I totally agree with the comments about this being a regional issue. It truly is. We get commuters from Sonoma County back and forth in the morning and the evenings in fairly significant volumes every day. I mean, as most people know, I live and work at the hub. I'm at Ground Zero and have been for a long time, and observe the conditions. What I think is significant, and I would really urge Mayor Colbert to continue to pursue as our person on the Transportation Authority of Marin board, is to push for money. Obviously, the town of San Anselmo never could afford on its own to construct a traffic circle at the hub. But since it's regional, and since the volumes of 65 grand a day are truly regional, that's something that we should really look at. And I just would push back against Dave's comment about, well, it's too expensive and it's sort of long-term and it's not really worthy of consideration so much now. I totally disagree with that and think that we ought to put our best efforts now to ultimately achieve that outcome, should that be the final decision. So thank you. It's a really good program, long time needed, and I appreciate everybody's effort in making it happen.
Thank you very much. All right, no more hands, no more comments.
Okay, well, thanks, Dimitri and folks. So here's a fun photo. This is looking up from Bank Street along Sir Francis, was now Sir Francis Drake. We actually was a little bit to the right, but there's so much history. It was the junction when this photo was taken, and it was certainly mostly railroad and some dirt roads years ago. There's Red Hill in the background. The history has driven the configuration of this roadway, of this intersection, and we're respectful of that, and it is a constraint at the same time. But our next steps, tonight was a big night for us. It is, again, to get people's feedback, and we got some really good input tonight about things to look at, areas to consider, concerns that folks have. So now we're going to step into the third task there, which is to start developing some conceptual alternatives. And then we'll start evaluating those. We'll report back in late summer, early fall about what we're seeing and how some of these things perform. I do want to state that it's not up to us what's short, medium, or long term. We're going to evaluate all these things, all these different options. And we'll also develop some conceptual cost estimates so that, you know, so some of these could be pursued. And then finally, prepare a final report that will be presented to the town council. It will include next steps for design, perhaps, and funding purposes. So we're really excited, and we'll look for other opportunities to include folks. And I'm going to give you an email address of Scott momentarily, so you can provide some additional information and insight if you have some you want to. And here it is. So on the bottom of this slide, there's Scott's name and his email address, schneider@townofsananselmo.org. You can also find a website, but that is hosted by the town. It's www.townofsan assembly.org/121/hub-transportation-study. And I'm sure if you just go on the website or Google it, San Anselmo Hub Transportation Study, that webpage will come up and you can provide information to Scott, which will get to the team immediately that way. So with that, I wanted to thank folks, and super important. We'll probably see you out there while we're doing more work at the hub intersection itself. So I don't know if Mayor or Vice Mayor want to provide any closing comments.
No, I think you did a great wrap up, Dave. Thanks again. And I look forward to seeing everyone at the second of our hub studies. And I just want to say, in response to my fellow council members, Green, there's nothing like acting in the present. So I think, we have a critical mass, and let's make this happen, whatever that solution turns out to be, with all the various stakeholders and community input. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks. I'll end the meeting, and then the video will be available on the town website as well, on that hub study page. Thank you all.